We're in the book of Ecclesiastes, and Solomon has this great experiment going on to ascertain what? The purpose of life. Why are we here? What are we supposed to accomplish? What are we supposed to be doing? And he searched and he searched and he searched. He searched out wisdom. He searched out madness and folly. He searched out pleasure. He searched out work and labor. And every bit of it so far has been vanity and vexation of spirit. And if there were a theme to the book, that would be it. Vanity and vexation of spirit. A life without God is totally empty, isn't it? It's totally empty. True or false? Solomon writes this book for the most part, having a view of life without God. That's true, isn't it? For the most part, that's what he's trying to get us to understand. Okay? If there is no God, if I don't serve God, if God's not around, then I can do all this stuff and I can invest myself in all of these things and nothing really matters, does it? Doesn't matter whether I'm rich, doesn't matter whether I'm poor, doesn't matter whether I'm a fool, doesn't matter whether I'm wise. It doesn't matter, because the only thing that's going to happen to everybody is what? You just die. And he said in our last lesson that even the animals do that. So therefore, if we are just higher classed animals, then we're really no different than the animal kingdom, are we? And very, very interesting. But throughout the book, does Solomon just totally, completely reject God? No. There's times when he comes around and he injects God into the text, and we learn some wonderful things about God. One of the things that we learned was this: God made everything beautiful, didn't He? Everything beautiful. And how the world works and the intricate relationships that are found there, including who? Including man, are very, very beautiful, aren't they? I find it interesting today that we have environmentalists and we have these environmental kind of worshipers, and they act like we're the evil ones. Okay? And they're trying to do everything they can do to save the planet, and if they could, they would almost just remove us from off the face of the earth so the planet could thrive. Well, guys, guess what? We are a part of God's beautiful creation, and we are part of this intricate working that goes on in our world, and we need to remember that. Another thing that he makes mention about God, and we've studied this, is that He has put eternity where? In their hearts. Okay? He created man with eternity in their hearts. What does that mean? Yes, that every race, every culture that you ever go out and study, they always believe that there is something beyond this world, right? If we are creatures who can only understand things through our five senses, okay, then the only thing that we would understand would be this world, right? And it would be almost impossible for us to think about anything beyond this world, especially a God who rules and reigns over us. And yet, that concept is prevalent in every society, isn't it? That there's something, an intelligence, a being, a supreme ruler, someone who is out there over mankind and involved in the world somehow. God has put eternity in our hearts. He also said that it was God who commanded us to work. Thanks, God. You know, most of us would rather play, hadn't we? But it was God who created work. And is there some good in work? Oh yes, there's some profit in work. Now, if work is all there is, then there's no profit in that. But there's some good in work. And so God is the creator of that. Another point that he made about God was this. He says that man can search out, and man can search out, and man can study, and man can research, and he will never what? He will never find out all there is to know. And we kind of played on evolution, didn't we? When we talked about that point. Evolution says that man has been on the planet about how long? Anybody remember? About 3 million years, something like that. 3 or 4 million years. Is that a long time? That is a long time. 3 million years, you know. If you don't think so, just go sit somewhere and wait 3 million years. Okay? And just see how long that is. It's a long time. And has man done very much in 3 million years? You know, we talked about, well, we made it to the moon. Wow. Right? 200 and something thousand miles away. Ooh, boy, you know. And we put a little lunar module up on Mars. Ooh, right? And we've got some satellites that have gone almost, not quite, almost to the edge of the galaxy, but not all the way, right? Now think about that. 3 million years, and we haven't even got out of our own planetary system. Much less to the end of the galaxy, to the end of the Milky Way, and then there's millions and millions of other galaxies out there. Guys, God's created this world so big and so massive that guess what? You and I will never be able to search it out completely. It's an impossibility. And so Solomon tells us all these things that he sees about God even in the universe itself. And it lets us know that Solomon isn't just casting God aside. Okay? He always reminds us every now and then there is a God. But we finally get to Ecclesiastes 3:16, and in his experimentation he finds something else very interesting. And he says this, "And moreover, I saw under the sun the place of judgment, that wickedness was there, and the place of righteousness, that iniquity was there." When Solomon was conducting this great experiment, do you think it took him into courts of law from time to time? Most likely, okay. He'd have to go places and get approval for this and go places and get approval for that. Maybe something happened that was not the way it should be, and somebody brings him into court. And so he's gone to what he refers to as the place of judgment and the place of what? Righteousness. Guys, there are places on earth that God has established wherein judgment and righteousness are supposed to take place. Courts of law, where right is supposed to rule. And Solomon says this, "When I got there, I saw that wickedness was there. When I got there, I saw that iniquity was there." Notice point A there. In those places one would expect to find truth and justice, wouldn't you? And in those places you would expect to find equity and fairness. And Solomon said, nope, that's not what I found. I found wickedness and iniquity. How sad that is. The definition of wickedness: wrong. Just wrong. Another definition: wickedness as violence and crime against civil law. In other words, here we are, we go into a place where we're expected to find righteousness, and what do we find? We find criminality. We find injustice. We find individuals that are just as wicked or more wicked than the very one that they are supposed to be judging. That's sad, isn't it? Sinful and evil men often occupy positions of judgment, don't they? And that's sad. They look out for their own best interest. They seek to get rich in their position. They want to keep their power as long as possible. They want to enjoy the perks that come from the job. In my mind, every position of power, every position of authority that ever exists needs time limits. You know that? And sometimes you think the shorter the gooder. And that's terrible English. But the shorter the better, right? You know, people get in their positions and they get comfortable. People get in their positions and they learn the ropes. And people get in their positions and they learn to enrich themselves, empower themselves, and then it's almost impossible to get rid of them, isn't it? Okay? It blows my mind that in our Congress, okay, and I'm talking about both houses, okay, and I'm talking about both parties, we got folks that are ancient. You know what? Now, I realize that, when I say 85, 86, 87, 88, and 89, some of you are going, but he just called me ancient. Well, I'm sorry, okay? You are, okay? But when you get to be 70, 80, 90 years old, that's pretty old, is it not? And sometimes you're not what you used to be when you were 20, 30, and 40, and 50 years old. Okay? And yet they stay, don't they? Notice point number 3, they have all of the things they want. Thus, they often pervert justice and undermine righteousness in order to hold their position. How sad it is. They cater to the rich and powerful. They'll take bribes and allow guilt to go free. They will punish the innocent in order to receive a promotion. Sounds like, to me, 21st century news. Doesn't it you? People say, oh, the Bible's so irrelevant. No, The Bible is fresh as the morning news, folks. Solomon said, I went into these places of judgment and righteousness, and I found wickedness and iniquity. Look at Isaiah 59, beginning of verse 4. None calleth for justice, nor any pleadeth for truth. They trust in vanity, they speak lies, they conceive mischief and bring forth iniquity. The way of peace they know not, and there is no judgment in their goings. They have made them crooked paths. Whosoever goeth therein shall not know peace. Therefore judgment is far from them. Neither does justice overtake us. We wait for light, but behold obscurity, for brightness, but we walk in darkness. And judgment is turned away backward, and justice standeth afar off. For truth is fallen in the street, and equity cannot enter. Folks, that's a description of 21st century United States. You know that? It's a description of our world today, and it's sad, but that's the way it's been. And that's the way it's been for a long, long period of time, hasn't it? And isn't it wonderful when you finally get somebody in a position like that, and they are righteous, and they are godly, and they do want to do what's right instead of what's wrong? And when they finally get into that position, everybody ridicules them. You know it? Because they stand out like a sore thumb. You know it? And it's just amazing. Is there a being who occupies that position of judgment perfectly? Oh yes. Folks, that's God Almighty. Okay? One time Abraham asked the question, shall not the judge of all the earth do right? And guys, the judge of all the earth will always do right. Okay? And we'll not stand before Him and fool Him. Okay? And He won't take our excuses, and He won't take all of our, prejudices, and He's not going to take all of our stuff and just overlook it. Okay? He will judge what? Perfectly when it comes to judgment. And it gives us some hope, doesn't it? We're glad because we can look forward to that day when all the injustices of the world will be corrected, and it will happen. Okay? It will happen. Now notice this next one, because he talks about that very thing. I said in mine heart, God shall judge the righteous and the wicked. For there is a time there for every purpose and for every work. Ooh-wee. In the previous verse, Solomon said he had seen places of judgment perverted, hadn't he? And then he says this, God shall judge the righteous and who? And the wicked. God will judge the righteous whose judgment was taken from them. Isn't that wonderful? You stand in court and you get judged inappropriately. Well, guess what? One day I get to stand before God and He'll judge me righteously. Will He not? I've been a righteous person. I didn't commit the crime. I got convicted of the crime. But God will correct that. Notice the next point. God will judge the wicked who perverted judgment and took justice from the righteous. All these wicked judges, all these wicked people who are in places of power, one of these days, they'll stand before the judge. That's always interested me, and I've talked about this in class before. Every position of power and authority that you can name, God has been in it. You know that? Is Jesus the Good Shepherd? You see, He knows what shepherds' duties are. And we have shepherds in our congregations, don't we? And guess what? They're not going to be able to stand there and say, God, you don't know what it's like to be a shepherd. Jesus is going to say, yes, I do. I'm the what? I'm the Good Shepherd. I know exactly what the role is and what the job is and how to carry it out. You don't tell me that. Well, you just don't know what it's like to be a parent. I don't. I got tons of children. And not all of them been good either. I know exactly what it's like. Well, you don't know what it's like to be a preacher. Yes, I do. My son came and he preached on this earth. We know exactly what it's like. There's not a role that God hasn't occupied. And we'll stand before Him and give an account of that role if we are in it, before the one who holds it supremely. And that's kind of scary, isn't it? God will judge the righteous judges who applied the law fairly. That's a good thing too, isn't it? Okay? You may get a lot of ridicule. You may get a lot of kickback here. But one of these days, when you stand before God as a righteous judge, what a wonderful thing. Well done, thou good and faithful servant. God will judge the wicked who are judged fairly and suffer punishment for their offenses. Guys, if you were judged correctly and you were guilty of the crime, God still will what? He's still going to hold you accountable for that crime in the last day unless you take care of that in this life. So God's there. He's going to judge who? He's going to judge the righteous and the wicked, all men. Now notice what He says. For there is a time for every purpose and for every work. Really, He says this, for there is a time there for every purpose and every work. A time where? A time in the hereafter. A time when you stand before God. There is a time there for every purpose and every work. Man. Psalm 9, 7, and 8. But the Lord shall endure forever. He hath prepared His throne for what? For judgment. And He shall judge the world in righteousness. He shall minister judgment to the people in righteousness. Acts 17:31. Because He hath appointed a day in the which He will judge the world in righteousness by that man whom He hath ordained, whereof He hath given assurance unto all men, in that He hath raised Him from the dead. How many of you believe that Jesus Christ was raised from the dead? Anybody? Folks, if you believe that, you know what God says? That is an absolute certainty that judgment is coming. Okay? Just as certain as He was raised from the dead, He's going to what? Judge the world in righteousness. So if you believe one and don't believe the other, you're a fool. Okay? You're a fool. Notice point E there. This idea that God will one day judge the righteous and the wicked, that ought to strike terror into the hearts of all men. You know that? One of these days I stand before God. It should strike terror into the hearts of the wicked. It should cause the righteous to burst in song, because the judge of the earth will do right. Questions, comments, anybody? Nobody? Y'all are a quiet bunch today. Yes, ma'am. Go, Beverly. Flip a coin, Bill. Here, let me flip. Yep, the Murdoch trials. Yep. Yep. That's the kind of courtroom we want, where justice prevails. Well, it's out there. That's been the biggest thing out there in a long time, as far as a trial is concerned. It seemed like they always got to find something to focus on. I didn't even know that guy. Did y'all? Before he got on TV, I didn't even know the man, And all of a sudden, and I hadn't paid any much attention to it. I've listened to what's happening, but I didn't even know him. All of a sudden, he's on TV like crazy. I thought, man, I know. Unbelievable. But he was a wicked man. Notice this next statement. And I said in mine heart concerning the estate of the sons of men, that God might manifest them, and that they might see that they themselves are what? Are beasts. Wow. That's a wicked thought, isn't it? When you and I think of ourselves, do we think of ourselves as beasts? No. I realize that I'm a created being. But, yesterday when we were at that men's day over in Lake City, Brother John DeBerry preached, and boy, he'd let you know real quickly that we've been made in the image of God. We're not just these animals walking around, and yet all of a sudden Solomon comes along and says, I hope that man will open up their eyes, that things will be manifested unto them, and that they'll see that they're just what? Just beasts. Woo-wee. That's a tough definition, isn't it? He longed for God to manifest them, to clarify, to examine, to purify, to purge, to cleanse or make bright, to test or prove. The word here means to clarify, make them see clearly. Notice how the verse continues, that they might see. That they are what? Beasts. Are we supposed to be higher than the animal kingdom? We're supposed to be, aren't we? And the Bible does say we've been made in the image and likeness of God, Genesis 1, 26 and 27. I'm supposed to be greater than a beast. But notice that there are times when man acts just like the beast of the field, don't they? Oh yeah, sometimes even worse than the beast of the field. I want you to keep the passage in context, okay? He's just talked about what? Injustice in the world, right? That I went into these court of laws that are supposed to promote righteousness and justice, and I found sin and wickedness and iniquity therein. He says, God, help them to see, help them the eyes to be open, that they can see that sometimes they act just like what? Just like beasts and animals of the field. And like Brett said, even worse.
God gave the animals instinct.
Yep.
And gave man conscience. So that's a big difference, and that's how we're higher than they are.
Oh yes, big time. And that's for the beast, it's a matter of what? Just survival. It's survival of the fittest, isn't it? And like Larry said, God gave them basic instincts that they can operate on so they can survive. Okay? Oh, absolutely. I was thinking this morning, and I made a point that it just hit me when I was studying for the lesson, my first lesson. We talked about the devil being a serpent and how that serpent resembled Satan. And one of the points that I made was this, and I don't know if you thought about it or not. God created those serpents, even early on, to be able to bite and kill. Okay? Those animals that were on the face of the earth, they had to what? They had to live, didn't they? Just like they have to live now. God didn't make those animals where they never had to eat, never had to drink, never had to do anything. He made those animals so they had to live. Well, if you're a snake and you like mice, you got to kill the little joker first, don't you? So you wait and you wait. You find that perfect strike time. You bite him, you kill him, and you swallow him. Got that big knot in your belly for a while. Okay, but even though he had that ability, it doesn't make him evil, does it? That's just what? That's his survival technique, isn't it? That's the way he lives. Okay? But man sometimes acts like the worst of the animals, doesn't he? We act just like the animals, and yet we're not supposed to. Yes. In the business world, big time, isn't it? Yeah. In almost everything. That dog eat dog. She made mention of that. I had a friend of mine, he was my supervisor at the children's home. And rather than saying dog eat dog, he'd always heard it said real fast, like Southerners say, dog eat dog. And what he thought it said was doggity dog. And he said, it's just a dog-eat-dog world. And we just started laughing. We said, what'd you say? It's a dog-eat-dog world. He said, no, Paul, it's not a dog-eat-dog world. It's a dog-eat-dog world. Oh, I didn't know what y'all were saying. Oh, craziest thing I ever heard in my life. So funny. Guys, there's all kinds of ways that we can manifest brutality toward one another, isn't there? And we can operate sometime even worse than the animals. Okay? I know that Murdahl was convicted by a jury of his peers and found guilty. Okay? I wasn't there. I don't know. I haven't even heard all the evidence. I don't know. If the man did that and the jury said he did, that is a horrendous act. Isn't it? To kill your wife and your son? Who does that? I realize the animal kingdom sometimes eats themselves, but we're so much different than that, or at least supposed to be different than that. And it even happens within the church, doesn't it? Sometimes we act worse than animals toward one another. But if you bite and devour one another, take heed that you be not consumed one of another. The Bible says in Galatians 5, verse 15. We have to be careful not to become brute beasts in the way we live. And Solomon says, I want man to open their eyes. I want man to see that that's the way that sometimes they act. Just like what? Just like the animals of the field. And how sad it is. Questions, comments, anybody? Nobody. He continues with that thought. And he says this in verse 19, for that which befalleth the sons of men befalleth the beasts. Even one thing befalleth them, as one dieth, so dieth the other. Yea, they all have one breath, so that a man hath no preeminence above a beast, for all is what? All is vanity. If we are evolved creatures, what makes us any better than the least creature? No, I said if we are evolved creatures, I didn't say created beings. I said if we are evolved creatures, what makes us any different from the least of the creatures? Nothing. Not one thing is any different. And this is something that we as Christians, we don't do a very good job promoting what we really believe. You know what? The evolutionists do, and they scream out loud, and they scream a long time, and it's amazing how many people believe the junk that they believe, and how many platforms that they've infiltrated with their quiet. You know what? We're way too quiet. If I am an evolved being, I'm no better than a dog. It's just all it is to it. And if that evolutionist has a kid, that kid's no better than a chicken. No better. And you need to tell him that. You know what? That kid right there is no different than a snake in the grass. Oh, yes, he is. No, he's not. He's just evolved just like that snake's evolved. And both of them are just going to what? Just grow up and die. And that's what Solomon says here. If there is no God, we're just like the beast of the field. And there's one thing that's going to happen to all of us, and it's just die. Unbelievable. See, the question we need to ask the evolutionists is what? Is a man any different than an animal? Am I any different than a monkey? Am I any different than a dog? Am I any different than a mouse? Thanks. She went to the lowest level. Okay? Is Vic any different than a cockroach? Okay? I have trouble with this young lady on the front row. I warn everybody about her all the time. But it's true, isn't it? I mean, if we're just, evolved animals, we're no better than cockroaches. It's unbelievable. Who was it? It was Brother, can't think of his name right now, Brother Thompson. He used to say that if there's, no God, if we're just evolved animals, then there's no difference in stepping on a cockroach or taking a baby as soon as it's born out of a womb and crushing its skull against the side of a wall. There's no difference because they're just what? They're just blobs of matter. That's all we are. And folks, we're a lot different than that. Rodney?
I was just going to say, ask the evolutionists, when one of their animals gets sick and gets ready to die, who do they take it to? They take it to either a man or a woman to save its life, right?
Yep.
That proves that we're smarter than the animals.
At least they think we are.
Yet the same people that are in charge allow babies to be killed in the womb.
Oh yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Just think about it. If we're just like an animal, then the only thing that we have a body and we have a life principle, don't we? And that's it. And every animal has a body and a life principle. And once the principle of life departs from that body, then you just what? You just die. So if there is no God, if I am no different than the animals, then I have no preeminence whatsoever. I'm no different, except that I know maybe how to survive better than they do. Okay? Jim, what you got? Oh, yeah. Yep. Doesn't matter how many buildings you jump off either, does it? Yes, sir.
I think it was Brother Rex Turner. I had this little kind of a poem about the folly of the evolutionary theory, and I don't know if I can remember it correctly or not, but it's something like this: "Hush, little ladybug, don't you cry. You'll be a June bug by and by. Maybe in 1,000,000 years or more, you'll be a college sophomore." Once I was a monkey hanging in a tree. Now I'm a teacher with a PhD.
And if you know Brother Turner, he had a PhD. He was a very smart man. And that's good. That is good. Guys, if we're just like the beast, then all is vanity. When I was growing up, I remember Phil Donahue. Anybody remember Phil Donahue? Had the Phil Donahue show. And he came out with a book. And the book was entitled simply this: The Human Animal. The Human Animal. And in that book, he expressed this idea that we're just evolved animals, that humans are just what? Just animals. And how sad that is. There are many in our world who believe that we are just intelligent animals, aren't we? But you know what? And look at that last point. If we're just animals and die, what is our use? What's our purpose? What's our benefit? You see, notice that. Wouldn't it be better just to be an animal in the wild? That'd be fun. You know, I'd love just to be a wild horse. Wouldn't you? Just run around the field, eat some grass, you know. Just do whatever I want to do. How about this next one? Wouldn't it be better to be a show dog or a champion racehorse? Now that would be the life, wouldn't it? You know? Champion racehorse. Raced about 15 races in my life. You know? They're always feeding me good. You know, they wash me. They brush me. They exercise me. When I get a little sick, they take care of me. And then they turn me out to a pasture after it's all over just to do what? Raise some kids. And I don't even have to take care of them.
Break a leg and they shoot you.
There you go. Just break a leg and shoot. No, not much suffering. Wouldn't it be better just to be an animal at the zoo or animal kingdom? And those guys got it made. You know it? Just go watch them chimpanzees and stuff. You know? They just got it made out there, don't they? You know, why would I want to be a human being and have the heartache and have the misery and have the responsibilities and have to do all this stuff and labor and work? Just let me be an animal and, whoo, wouldn't it be fun? Well, I believe that. How?
Yeah, yesterday I was heading to the beach, going through and saying, I remember that dead raccoon I saw in the middle of the road behind that thing. What a life that he had. It had.
Yep. But, you know, he may have lived good till he got hit. You know? you just don't know, you know? All right, guys. Thank you. We appreciate